The social justice issue I will be discussing is euthanasia. Euthanasia is the right for people to choose to have legalized assisted suicide to end their suffering. Euthanasia is not about providing people with the choice to die, but about giving people the choice to end their suffering in a way that gives their death a peaceful and dignified end. The Tasmanian Bill for Euthanasia will require the desired participant to be a Tasmanian adult who is competent to make a decision. The desired participant must be in an advanced state of a serious and incurable condition, and they must have no chance of improvement or recovery. The desired participant must be suffering in intolerable pain that cannot be resolved by palliative care, and they must be diagnosed by a specialist and have it signed off by two independent doctors. It is vital to understand that euthanasia is a last resort option. In Tasmania, the campaign to legalise voluntary euthanasia began in the 1990s, when the Tasmanian supporters formed the advocacy group Dying with Dignity in 1992. The Greens leader O'Connor states in ABC News that currently 80 to 85% of the public support euthanasia. However, despite this, on the 8th of May 2017, the Tasmanian proposal bill for euthanasia was rejected. The bill has been rejected by the Tasmanian lower house 3 times since 2009. Currently, in the world, there are 7 international jurisdictions that have voluntary assisted dying frameworks, including Canada and a number of US states. Other Australian states are currently contemplating similar schemes, including New South Wales, Victoria, and Western Australia. The social issue of euthanasia is a political issue I'm very passionate about, as it relates to my personal values of respect, equality, open-mindedness, and empathy. It is a very relevant social issue, with there currently being heavy debate about the subject in Tasmania. I personally believe that every person should have the right to respectful, dignified death. I believe it is my duty as a social worker to question authority, with my personal value of justice, meaning that I am guided by a moral belief of what is right and what is wrong, rather than simply following the government's procedure. I'm highly motivated to create change for this social issue because of my personal values of empathy that provides me with compassion, and understanding towards the lived experience of people affected by this social issue. The social issue of euthanasia also relates to my personal value of equality, as it would allow me to address the dynamic of power between the community members and the government. Euthanasia is a social issue that the community can't get justice for because of the government's refusal to pass the bill. I also have a selfish motivation to want to create a change that legalizes euthanasia, as I personally want euthanasia in Tasmania, so that if I ever become in a situation where I am in intense suffering, I have euthanasia rather than spending the last few years of my life in serious pain. This is especially a concern when I self-reflect on my social work placement that I took place in a hospital where I worked with elderly patients that were in intense pain and would have loved the option of euthanasia.
Well, you only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go.
In Tasmania, there are many people that would benefit from the social change that would legalise euthanasia. I would like to share with you the lived experience of one of these community members. This is a story I got from the ABC News. It is about a Hobart man called Matthew Kent Goodman. He was a 55-year-old lawyer who had an aggressive form of multiple sclerosis and took his own life after 3 long years of suffering. Matthew's son states his father would have loved the right to have an assisted death, saying that it was tough to see his father in absolute agony, stating that was not living. He just found it very humiliating. In the lead up to his death, Mr. Kent Goodman recorded his own eulogy and expressed sadness that he could not have his friends and family around him at the very end, but he did not want to risk implicating them in a crime. It is because of stories like this I want to work for a change in this social issue. Drawing on my personal values of open-mindedness, I can think outside the rigid social constructs of society and understand that people are not given any other option to the pain and suffering other than to take their own lives in horrible and tragic circumstances. By listening to the lived experience of Matthew Kent Goodman and his son, I have a deeper understanding of the social issue, and I can understand that the alternative option to euthanasia is people being forced to make desperate decisions.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming. I hope this doesn't seem too creepy. A voice from beyond. Amongst my meagre list of accomplishments, I was never very good at public speaking, but rest assured anything I say today comes straight from the heart. Please do not be sad and upset. You're here to celebrate my life, and I had a good one. Well, the last couple of years were a bit rocky, as you can tell from my appearance.
By listening to the lived experience of Matthew Kent Goodman and his son's experience, I now have a deeper understanding of the social issue of euthanasia, and I can understand that the alternative option to legalizing euthanasia is people being forced to make desperate decisions. This personal insight has highlighted to me how important my role as a social worker is to empower the community members that have been affected by the euthanasia, such as Matthew, with a voice, and get the community members to listen so they can truly understand how significant this social issue is. As a social worker, it is important that I'm educating the community about this social issue. One such evidence to draw on is the Victorian Coroner's Office study on suicide in Victoria that showed 240 people had unregulated and unsupported suicides between 2009 to 2013. After these people took their lives after experiencing deteriorating physical health due to disease or injury. These people had to do it without family or medical support out of fear of implicating a loved one in a crime. The Tasmanian Euthanasia Bill would not only provide these people with a suicide of dignity. The Tasmanian Euthanasia Bill would not only provide those in suffering with a compassionate end of life, it would also provide doctors, medical professions, and patients' family and friends with safety and a peaceful resolution to their loved ones' deaths. My role as a social worker is to empower the community by educating them and listening to their opinions. I will also be working to unite the community by facilitating an environment where they can learn from each other and understand each other's perspectives. My main goal as a social worker is to allow the communities to make their own decision regarding euthanasia in Tasmania, no matter what they decide. I am working for social change that hopefully will legalise community members to make their own decisions whether to have euthanasia to end suffering, no matter who that individual is and what they believe. I believe I can achieve this social change by using a bottom-up community framework. This will work for the social change by listening to the voices from below in the community. It will allow me to work with the community members not only to have this change, but exactly what in this change they want. This means not only making community members heard in demanding their rights, but also heard to modify the proposed bill and to define exactly what these rights ought to be and how they should be expressed. One of the main challenges of the social issue of euthanasia is that it is a topic that people do not want to discuss, as it makes people feel uncomfortable. Therefore, people continue to deny that this social issue exists and turn away from it, believing if they can't see it, it can't be happening. To address this, I will be starting a dialogue about this social issue, an attempt to engage the community. The skill of dialogue will engage all of the perspectives of all the different people in the community and address the community tension around this issue through reaching for a mutual agreement that then can propel joint action. There are many different opposing perspectives of this bill in the Hobart community to acknowledge. One of these differing perspectives in the community is the Medical Association, with the federal branch spokesman Dr. Chris Moy arguing that the definition of medical condition is too vague and arguing that palliative care is the preferred option. A second differing perspective is the Church opposition to the bill, with the Tasmanian Archbishop Julia Portis stating euthanasia will send a negative message to vulnerable people, such as the elderly or disabled. It will be sending the message that they are a nuisance, and that their life is not worth living. The Church argues that we need to show vulnerable people respect and assure that they feel worthy. The Archbishop also claims that before long, the euthanasia bill, there will be following bills that will expand those who can be euthanized, such as the elderly and disabled. However, within this community there is political support. Labour leader Rebecca White argues that people are the owner of their own bodies, and that the bill is about providing a choice. She states we must do better to elevate the suffering and provide dignity and peace to people in their final stage of life. Labour leader Rebecca White reassures the conditions set out in the bill for the eligibility to access an assisted death are robust, and they do protect against misuse and those vulnerable in the community. By using the bottom-up community framework, I will be allowing community members to participate in decision-making and taking their input on board when shaping this bill, and allow them to contribute to their definition of what a good society is. The bottom-up community project does rely on participation of the community to make this social change. Therefore, it is a vital part of my role to encourage community participation. To achieve this, I will use IFE's 2002 participation skill to make sure that people in the community understand that this social issue of euthanasia is important. By making them understand how important it is, I will be motivating people to get involved and hopefully find them to be as passionate about this issue as I am. I will achieve this encouragement through the education and by empowering people who have been affected by it to discuss their lived experience with those in the community. I will also make sure that people that do participate feel acknowledged and valued to assure that they continue participating. I will do this by making sure that I listen to everyone's perspectives and that I allow everyone's input into shaping this change. By doing all of this, I'm encouraging community participation and making sure that the bottom-up framework will be utilised to its full potential. I will also use a conflict-based theory to have a controlled debate between those in the community for and against euthanasia. My role as a social worker in this situation will be to mediate the debate and keep the debate civilized and productive, only intervening in the debate when necessary, for example, if the conflict becomes aggressive or starts attacking people personally. This will allow myself and the community to identify our common goals and the main differences between the differing perspectives in the community. This will also allow the community to identify aspects of the bills that causes those against the bill to have concern, and thus we can work to appease the bill to appease them. It will also provide community members with understanding of each other's point of view and provide an opportunity to address each other's concerns, and this will facilitate change more effectively. I will then apply an anti-oppressive approach that challenges the structure and systems in place in Tasmania that oppress the community and prevent community members from having the choice of euthanasia and the choice of a dignified death. This approach will examine the power imbalance between the community and the government and develop strategies to address the oppressing structure. An example of this would be creating petitions, organising protests, and utilising the media to get the message out there. I will be approaching the social issue of euthanasia with a political development approach that acknowledges that the political is personal, especially to the community it directly involves. This approach will increase the participation of community members by raising awareness and increasing social action in the community. By addressing the social issue of euthanasia within the community rather than in an impersonal bureaucratic system, it will provide personal and spiritual development within the community, with a strong commitment to social justice and human rights. It will also develop interpersonal relationships and community connections, creating a better community. I will also be working with the community in a capacity-building approach that will empower individuals and build relationships within the community. This approach will acknowledge that the community is the expert of their own situation, and it will allow clients to have the community members to have an active role in creating change that they want. By doing this, the community members will also learn skills and strategies to continue fighting for euthanasia without my social work support. This will allow community members to take control of their own lives. And as a direct result of a capacity building approach, I'll be able to build the community to a point where the community is able to work independently for the social change of euthanasia. This means that if I was unable to continue doing community development practice, the community would be able to continue working for the social change of euthanasia without any more of my intervention. It is hopeful that by passing the Tasmanian Bill in the local community, this will result in a global change with other states and countries passing a similar bill and resulting in the globalizations of euthanasia that will provide everyone with the option of a dignified and respectful death. My role as a social worker is to empower the community by educating them and listening to their opinions. I will also be working to unite the community by facilitating an environment where they can learn from each other and understand each other's perspectives. My main goal as a social worker is to allow the communities to make their own decision regarding euthanasia in Tasmania, no matter what they decide. I am working for social change that hopefully will legalise community members to make their own decisions whether to have euthanasia to end suffering, no matter who that individual is and what they believe. I believe I can achieve this social change by using a bottom-up community framework. This will work for the social change by listening to the voices from below in the community. It will allow me to work with the community members not only to have this change, but exactly what in this change they want. This means not only making community members heard in demanding their rights, but also heard to modify the proposed bill and to define exactly what these rights ought to be and how they should be expressed. Reflecting upon my community work, I can identify ethical challenges that I will come across in my community practice. Firstly, the ethical challenge of needing to empower the community to make its own decision without letting my own personal views on the issues influence my work. To assure that I prevent this, I will make sure that I keep in my role of facilitating discussion and empowering the community, rather than taking on a role of leading discussion or influencing the community in a certain way. This will make sure that my practice is objective and focused on the community's needs, rather than my own. Another ethical challenge will be making sure that since euthanasia is such a sensitive topic, that I'm able to raise conscious awareness of the issue in the community without upsetting people. To do this, I will approach the subject with intense sensitivity and will work in a way that does not attack people's personal beliefs. I will make sure that when I'm educating people, the material being produced is appropriate and does not have anything too shocking or graphic. Another ethical challenge is to make sure that when working with the community, I do not create a divide in the community, and that I work in a way that strengthens interpersonal relationships and community networks. It's important that when working with the community, I'm focused on strengthening their bonds and not destroying them. I believe that it is important that as a social worker, I am able to self-reflect on my community work practice. This will allow me to identify any aspects of my practice I could improve on and what particular strengths I should focus on. To examine the effectiveness of my community work practice, I will involve the whole community and ask them if my social work practice has been useful for them. As the most effective way to know if I have done some good is to, of course, ask the community and make sure that they feel that I have had a positive influence. I would ask the community in a formal setting, within a closed meeting with those directly involved, and in an informal setting, such as a meeting with the whole community. I will also observe the community and self-reflect on what I have achieved and what differences I have able to make. Then I will compare with my outcomes with what my original goals were to determine if my community work practice has been relevant and I have achieved what I set out to achieve. I will also observe the community and self-reflect on the ability of the community to now work independently without my social support, to make a judgment on my ability to build the capacity of the whole community.